Hey everyone, it is May 27, 2015. I'm Rene Ritchie, and right now we're going to talk about an iOS 8 Unicode bug. We're going to talk about Jony Ive being the Chief Design Officer, and we're going to talk about WWDC 2015. This is the iMore Show. Joining me this week, I have from newly clogged Cape Cod. How are you, Peter?
Fine, thank you. How you do?
Can you leave your driveway still?
Yeah, now that Memorial Day weekend is over, it'll be fine until about Friday at 2 p.m., and then we'll just hunker down like animals and hide until the weekend is over again.
Nice. Also joining us, Serenity Caldwell, who sounds like she's gone from feet of snow to degrees of heat.
Yes, it is very muggy here in dear old Boston, but we're surviving.
So it's not a dry heat.
No, it is a muggy heat. So I apologize in advance if you hear fan noises. It's mostly to make sure that I don't pass out.
Ouch. All right, if anyone sees Ren fall, just call 911. All right, so quickly off the top of the show, earlier today there was an iOS 8 Unicode rendering bug that was discovered. Unicode is an international standard that's used to encode, transmit, decode, and render text from all different kinds of countries. It can do everything from Arabic script to Chinese characters to the Roman alphabet. And what was happening was, as it was received by messages primarily on iOS, on the iPhone, the iPad, and the Apple Watch, and iOS started to render it, it would cause some sort of error that would crash Springboard, and it would either just crash the app, like the Messages app, or sometimes it would reboot or respring. It's kind of unclear whether it's respringing or reboot. So it's not exactly clear what's happening, but Apple did say that they were aware of it and that they're working on a fix. Usually they're pretty good about pushing these out quickly, but they will have to fix whatever bug is in core text or the Unicode parser or whatever part of the code base it is, and they will have to do QA on that, because the worst thing that can happen is they rush out a fix that has another bug in it that's maybe even worse or just as bad, and then we start this whole cycle over again. So my guess, it will be pretty quick. I think we're talking days though, and not hours, right, Ren?
Yeah, unfortunately, as terrible as a bug like this is, it's still going to take a little bit of time for engineers to lock down a fix. I can guarantee that the engineers in question are probably slaving over their computers right now, trying to make sure that their fix doesn't break anything else before they send it out. Because the last thing they want to do is send out a patch that fixes this bug but might crash messages on launch or do something horrible like that, or maybe disable emojis for everybody. That would suck too. So Apple is going to work as hard as they possibly can to get this fixed and straightened out, but it may take a day. Hopefully within 48 hours. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I would love 48 hours. I've come to expect like a week, but this is a hard one. So hopefully they'll do this as quickly, as responsibly as possible. Moving on, we have a new Chief Design Officer at Apple. Jony Ive used to be relegated to an off-loop office where he toiled away making designs for people who didn't appreciate them. Steve Jobs got there, rescued him. They made the iMac together. They went on to make the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, and now Apple has just launched the Apple Watch, which Jony Ive and Mark Newsom were integral to. And his reward was, I guess is reward the right way to say it, but Peter, he is now the new Chief Design Officer at Apple, which I guess is the second officer or C-level title after Tim Cook, CEO, and Luca Maestri, the CFO.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense because a while back, Johnny's role at Apple expanded from just designing the hardware on products to designing the software that ran on the products as well. So, as his responsibilities have increased, the people that report to him have increased in multitudes, and his responsibilities have increased. So this seems to be a sensible evolution or progression of his responsibilities at Apple. That hasn't stopped a lot of Kremlinology, as it were, or a lot of tea leaf reading about this whole thing, though.
I saw, Ren, I don't know about you, I saw sort of three broad camps. One was people saying this will give him more time with his family, more time in England, and maybe it's a foot out the door. Another group was saying this is consolidation of his power, and he's going to be even more influential when it comes to Apple. Another group said that, oh, this is a great way for Apple to hide Johnny's likely ever-increasing paycheck from Wall Street. And another group was sort of, it's a lot of things, but it's mostly just about Apple recognizing Jony.
Yeah, I tend to be in the last camp. I think it's a mixture of everything. Jony has, for a long time, basically been in the thick of managing and not creating. You know, he's gotten some time to do design work, but clearly his design staff is ever growing. And I think actually giving him a C-level position, whether it's in name only or otherwise, it gives him a little bit more freedom to say, oh, I'm going to designate people to manage this part of the business now, and I am going to focus more on the big picture stuff, the overall, the big dreaming, and then I'll come by to make sure that everything's running along smoothly. And honestly, you know, whether or not Jony, you know, stays with the company for another 10, 20, you know, odd years, having some, you know, building up the lesser members of his design group, I think is actually fantastic, because a lot of those people have been working for a long time on iOS and hardware design, and they deserve to be recognized. And the more that we can see that, you know, just like with Apple in the years before Steve Jobs' retirement and eventual death, we started to see more of the other C-level executives and more of the talent behind the room, so to speak, that wasn't just Steve Jobs. I think we need to see the same thing in design. I think Apple, at this point, has become such a big company that it needs to show the world a little bit that Jony is not the only person at Apple who is designing the big revolutionary products, and that there's a staff and a team, and those people do amazing work. And if Jony decides to leave at any point in the future, that it's in good hands.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I think there's been a couple of things that were super interesting recently. One was that they brought Mark Newsom on board in an official capacity, and Jony Ive used to collaborate extensively with Steve Jobs to the point where Steve Jobs would have so many opinions, Jony would maybe ask him to stop at times. But he didn't have that collaborator post Steve Jobs because that's not the kind of personality the other people at Apple are. But Mark Newsom is someone he could collaborate with, but he couldn't really share anything proprietary to Apple or subject to NDA at Apple, and now Mark Newsom is officially part of that machine. So maybe him just having that sort of kindred spirit on the design side saves a lot of things. Simultaneously, there was that big profile of Jony around the Apple Watch launch in I think it was the New Yorker, where it was an extensive profile about him, and it talked about how he just even recently he designs like the tables at Cafe Max and in the retail stores. His design expanse is vast. It's way more than just an iPhone. But now he has Richard Howarth, who I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who was a long-time industrial design. Jony Ive used to run industrial design, and then when Tim Cook came over, moved Scott Forstall out, he gave Jony Ive he gave him human interface as well, which used to be separate and siloed and not quite as centrally managed. And there were people like Greg Christie and Baz Early and a whole bunch of people there running it, but they started to fade away. And Jony Ive brought Alan Dye on, who was doing marketing, to work on iOS 7, and that famously has a much, I don't want to say print-inspired look, but it is a very clean, very typographical, very high-density sort of look. And Alan Dye went on to the Apple Watch project, and now you have Richard Howarth, who's going to become the new VP, who is the new VP of Industrial Design, and you have Alan Dye, who's the new VP of Human Interface, and they both report to Jony, but the day-to-day managerial tasks fall to Dye and Howarth, and I think, Ren, that's a way better setup for someone like Jony Ive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Johnny's big contribution to the company is his overall design vision, and if he can spend more time on that and less time on the day-to-day of the tweaking and the individual, you know, bit by bit, I think that will be a great thing. And also, you know what, giving him recognition of all of the work that he's done. I've never actually seen a CDO as a main job title before. You know, we hear about the big ones. We hear about the CEOs. We hear about the financial officers, the CFOs. Occasionally, we'll hear about marketing officers, CMOs. But having a chief design officer, I think, is a really big show of faith in Jony. And maybe it is something where, you know, it is a move by Apple to fully show Jony just how valued he is at the company. And I mean, we don't know yet if that comes along with some shares or anything like that. Restricted stock units. We'll find out during the next
fleet
SEC
of Bentleys.
filing. Yeah, exactly. A new house. TBD.
It's super interesting because like the CDO title sort of, I think it started in 2012, at least that's when I first saw it. I think it was Pepsi or somebody who came up with it, but it was a recognition that that is how you communicate as much as marketing and as much as some of the other divisions. Design is how you communicate your product, and it was super important. And I think very few companies still have it. And again, and Apple has very few C-level executives. One of the things, Peter, that always fascinated me though is over time, bad things can happen to artists. Maybe that's the wrong way of putting it. Like Bill Watterson famously walked away from Calvin and Hobbes. He felt like he was done and didn't want the spotlight anymore. And just as famously, George Lucas went on to make the prequels because he felt like he knew what was best and didn't need to listen to people anymore. And it seems like as much as this is everything else, this is also sort of keeping Jony in a position where he can be most effective and doesn't feel like rage quitting and doesn't feel like or isn't put in the position to make products that aren't any good.
One would hope. I mean, we can argue back and forth about, or not back and forth, but we can argue ad nauseum, really, on the internet and elsewhere about Jony Ive's overall importance to Apple's success over the years. But there's no question that he's made a very, very indelible statement about design on Apple's products. So, if making him CDO helps secure that for a while longer, or whatever improves the situation, then great. The interesting thing for me is that this move was leaked or announced on Monday, right?
By Stephen Fry.
Yeah, by Stephen Fry of all people, the comedian, the raconteur, the author. And the very well-established Apple enthusiast who's been seen at a number of Apple events in the past. It would have seemed anyway to be a statement or a move that was somehow positioned at Wall Street analysts and others, but there really hasn't been much of a Wall Street reaction to the news. So to that end, I'm not sure if it's inside baseball or what.
Yeah, no, I think I don't know if you have a take on this, Ren, but I think that Apple is just such a big company and they're very almost gun shy about Wall Street reactions, and it just behooved them to announce it on a Monday where everyone was forced to take a few minutes and think before just quickly reacting.
Yeah, I really feel like in general we need to breathe, just breathe, just calm.
Yeah, to put it in Don Melton terms, just calm the bleep down.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I think it's fascinating. I'm interested to see what happened. The last time there was a change with Jony Ive, we got iOS 7 and then Yosemite, and we got the Apple Watch, which I think all of you can debate the individual things like affordance and color palette and workflow and things like that, but I think it was a huge change for Apple, a very interesting one, and one that's enabled a lot of really cool things. And I want to see what happens with Jony Ive as CDO and with Richard Haworth and I hope you get those names right, and Alan Dye as their new VPs. I think if nothing else, we're in for interesting times.
Absolutely, and we can't forget the mysterious Project Titan lurking in the shadows, and whether or not this move will allow Jony to maybe focus a little bit on that. TBD on what that actually is, but
yeah, but that's true too. I think he said he's going to be working on Apple Campus 2. He's going to be working with Angela Ahrendts on the new retail store, and I don't know if it's clear whether that's a complete redesign or a steady evolution. But also there is the watch, which he was super passionate about, and there is Project Titan, which is probably an area he's super interested in too. So there's a lot of other things there that could interest him, and maybe just signing off on productivity reports all day was getting in the way of all that. Let's take a quick break so I can tell you about Red Hat. Red Hat is tried, tested, and trusted. It is literally Linux with no fuss and no muss. So open source is not news anymore. Everyone's heard about open source before. If you use an iPhone or an iPad or Mac or an Apple Watch, there's WebKit, which is open source. There's the Mac kernel. There's FreeBSD. All these things are built on open source technologies. It's widely accepted at the highest levels of computing. It's even accepted at enterprise computing now. But the extent of the adoption, I'm not sure everyone realizes how how ensconced it really is inside data centers and places like that. And a large part of that is due to Red Hat. And it's more than just Red Hat Enterprise Linux too. Red Hat offers storage solutions, cloud computing, everything you need for application development, all open source, all enterprise grade. The stats were really eye-opening for me. So Red Hat runs every executive department of the U.S. federal government, every executive department of the U.S. federal government, every airline, every telco, every healthcare company in the Fortune Global 500, New York Stock Exchange, and nearly every commercial bank in the Fortune 500. In fact, almost 90% of all the companies in the Fortune 500 use Red Hat for everything from critical to routine tasks. The only thing that's really surprising is how many people who know a lot about the sort of technology that an enterprise just don't know about this stuff. Like Netflix was a commando, a ninja, just kind of snuck in there and started taking care of these things and didn't really raise a fuss about it. But it's worth pointing out. So sometimes the most disruptive technologies are stuff that nobody notices at first, but they can be really helpful. If you work in enterprise, if you're planning enterprise deployment, if you need something that is open source, that is reliable, that is well supported, if you want to bring Linux in, but you want to make sure that it's done in a way that is absolutely rock solid and that you have all the sorts of high-level support that you're accustomed to in enterprise, Red Hat is absolutely something to look at. I used to work in enterprise. I worked in enterprise for decades, and we had Red Hat around all the time. So Red Hat, build on it, run with it, count on it. I want to thank Red Hat for sponsoring the show. Moving on to WWDC, we are, how far are we, like 8 days, 9 days?
Yeah, we're getting close.
God, panic, panic.
No, nobody needs to panic.
We are, so yeah, I mean, I was just going over the list of things, and there looks like there's so many things. We talked about some of them before, but I think it's probably good to focus on a few of them. Just to list out, I mean, I'm expecting at least iOS 9, OS 10, 10.11, probably the Apple TV refresh, the HomeKit update, information about the next version of watchOS, the SDK for, or at least the preview of the native SDK for the watch. Anything else, Ron? Anything else on the agenda?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, there's a lot, right? I feel like also we're talking about the sort of inside within all of this. Did you mention Swift? I think we'll probably hear some more about Swift. Yeah. There's a lot. And before everybody goes, oh, well, that sounds like too much for a WWDC, remember what they unleashed on us last year.
Yeah.
I think they have quite a slate of things that they could potentially talk about. We just heard today Mark Gurman broke yet another rumor about perhaps a Google Now competitor to for Apple that incorporates Siri and Spotlight and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we may hear about that. We may hear about transit directions and maps in iOS.
With the Siri thing, so this interests me a lot because Apple has always been technically or theoretically able to do this because they have access to vast amounts of data, maybe not the exact same kinds of data that Google does, but a lot of data both on your device and on iCloud, but they haven't wanted to be involved with commingling data on the cloud. It's been a policy decision. They wanted to, you ask a question, they give you an answer, and at no point do they conduct operations on your data on their servers, and this would seem to be a change in that policy.
Well, yes and no. I think that there are ways to get a Google Now-like experience that don't necessarily data mine. You look at what the Today screen is doing currently, where it's taking your calendar information, yes. Excuse me. It's taking your calendar information, allergies, but it is also doing so with your explicit permission. And I think that that's the major thing, is that this kind of a feature, if it exists and if it's going to roll out in iOS 9, we're probably going to get some explicit opt-ins, where it's like, would you like Apple to have your calendar information? Would you like Apple to be able to integrate your contacts? Siri uses a lot of your personal information, but it anonymizes it when it goes up to the cloud, and I imagine that will stay the same with this, is that it will be encrypted and it will not be device, or it will be device linked maybe and not necessarily cloud linked.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, for example, when I got my Nexus 5, I turned it on. It said, "Do you want to use Google Now?" I said, "Hell yeah," because it's a great service. And then I said, "Can we monitor all your web technology, your web traffic?" And I said, "No," because like I have nothing to hide, but I also don't need Google to do that. That's just not what I want from them. And they said, "Then you can't use Google Now," which to me felt like BS, because there's a lot of stuff they can provide me without monitoring my web traffic. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's just what it felt like to me.
Absolutely.
And I think Cortana, if I recall, walks a closer line. But maybe there is wiggle room in between what Google wants to do, where it devours everything, and what Apple can do selectively.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough question.
Because I would feel comfortable share, like for example, it knows the stuff locally on the device. There's a lot of things it can do that it's not doing yet, and that was that famous thing that Roger McNamee said back in the Palm Pre days, that we know your schedule. We should be able to tell you that traffic is going late. You've got to leave now. And everyone's been trying to realize that, and that is just traffic and calendar and location and all these things together. Some of the things I don't like is some services want access to your email, and they pre-read your email, sort through it, and say, you've got an email here from Air Canada or Virgin or Delta or something. We're going to just consume that and then add that to your alert card. We're going to go through and pick out this, and that to me feels kind of intrusive. And I know that that's the price you pay for that service. And if I had Jarvis in my house, Jarvis would know as many uncomfortable things about me as he knows about Tony Stark right now. Maybe I'm just scared and need to be eased into it.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I think that Apple can strike a happy medium, and I actually think most of these companies can strike a happy medium if they're willing to do so. You look at what the stuff that Apple can already recognize in emails, where it has that contextual support, and we saw this most recently with Force Touch, where if you see if an email shows up, certain things like addresses, for instance, you can Force Touch on them, and they'll pop up in Maps. Or, contacts you can automatically add from there. It can recognize dates and turn them into a calendar invite. So I think that Apple could actually get around this rather than doing the automatic raise your email super creepy thing. It could do the same thing that, like, say, when you have a passbook attached to your mail, your email, where you scroll through and then there's a little banner at the top that says, hey, this looks like a flight. Would you like us to add it to your map and your calendar? Hey, this looks like a dinner date. Would you like us to add it to your calendar? And that way it's an individual opt-in thing and not just we're blanket reading your email. It's more a quick contextual thing-by-thing happening.
Peter, you're my curmudgeon. Am I overreacting to this?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Apple's got to evolve the technology to keep up with what's going on, and there's always going to be that tension between providing utility and convenience and making sure that data is secure. So I think that's a valid concern. But the bottom line is that Apple has consistently, from the start, I think, separated itself from the competition by saying, look, your data isn't being used to sell you things. Your data isn't being manipulated by us for nefarious purposes, so don't worry about that. I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, my tinfoil hat says that, with Google, Apple, Facebook, all these companies, that it's not just what they do now, but the minute you give them your data, you've got to be concerned about what happens 20, 50 years from now. But that kind of thinking will drive you crazy. There's also talk of a Siri API, which, a friend of the show, Guy English, kind of explained years ago the challenges with that, where you have multiple. If you have Fantastical and maybe Calendar Plus or Calendar 5 installed in your computer, your iPhone, how do you know which one gets to take which action without making it onerous, but without causing collisions? So there's a lot of challenges around that, but that's also how you get that extra functionality. Right now, I use Siri, especially on my Apple Watch, for almost everything, on my iPhone for a lot of things, but anything past an app is a black box. Siri just can't really access it. It can launch it, but that's it. And allowing, so like if I could just say Overcast, play the iMore show, or if I could just say Fantastical, add an appointment, blah blah blah. And yeah, there's workarounds now, but that would make it much better. I don't want to expect too much because I realize how hard a task that is.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of truth to that. For my part, I would settle for Siri just being more reliable and being able to interpret the data that I'm inputting a little bit more effectively, because sometimes I've noticed that Siri just doesn't parse what I'm asking it or telling it accurately, or it doesn't follow up the way that I think that it should when I'm trying to get it to sort of do compound steps to things. And that's the sort of intelligence that I would like to see out of an intelligent assistant that I'm not seeing on a Siri right now.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I'd also like to see Siri come to Mac because we've heard for a long time, especially from people with accessibility needs, that the ability to have that voice control is really important to them, especially if they're blind or they have visual impairments. And not having it on the Mac makes the Mac actually less accessible to them than an iOS device. And parity there would be super great to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, having some kind of Siri interface on the Mac, even if it's through handoff, might be very useful. Obviously the Mac has Siri-ish capabilities and fits and starts. Dictation certainly fills in some of the blanks there, and Spotlight is getting more and more intelligent. And Apple isn't waiting for major monolithic operating system updates to improve Spotlight. Spotlight's ability to return useful, usable, actionable information based on what's on your Macintosh and what's also on the web has been improving incrementally as Apple improves the services that run Spotlight. I think we're seeing it sort of inexorably move to that. But yeah, it'd be really nice to talk to my Macintosh and have it do things, because I can't think of a better way to irritate the person sitting next to me at Starbucks.
I think that's very true. And Ren, you also mentioned in transit, which is another huge challenge because we talked about this before. Every municipality, I mean, some municipalities treat those as crown jewels and want total control over them, and it's really hard to go door to door and sort of get all that data. But Apple's been buying companies. Even so, Mark wrote about this recently that it's only going to launch in a handful of cities.
Yeah, well, I mean, just like the original Maps app only launched, did flyover data and things like that, and even its traffic data wasn't great until a year after launch, it takes time to roll this stuff out. People don't necessarily think about this because they're like, oh, well, Google Maps has been great forever. But really, Google Maps has had decades at this point to put together their archive. And Apple started mapping, what, in 2010, 2011? With the rollout of iOS 5. So it's been they haven't really had all that much experience building that kind of archive. So it makes sense, especially given the general feeling around maps, that they start limited and they start selective and then they build it out from there. There are still plenty of great third-party apps that have access to transit data. If they're going to launch a transit service, it needs to be rock solid.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% about that. Maps are something that everyone takes super seriously now. I've actually been really enjoying Maps on the Apple Watch more than I thought I would, because Apple owns that stack now, and they can do things like I start directions on my phone and I feel them on my watch, or I start them on my watch and then I suddenly hear them on the phone, and that sort of stuff is super powerful.
Absolutely. Although I have to say, for the first couple weeks that I was testing it, I was terrified that it wasn't going to direct me the right way. So I was definitely like looking at it every few seconds, and now I've kind of just started to relax and let myself go, and let myself trust the watch and the turns. Although I will say, things that I would like to see in the future from Apple Watch and traffic and maps would be a better indication of traffic and specifically alternate routes. That's one place I think that Google Maps still holds superior in maps. I know when I'm driving between northern and southern New England, I often go to Google Maps over the regular Maps app because that gives me a much better up-to-date version of my traffic and my daily patterns. And oh, take this route and you'll save 5 minutes. So I'm kind of hoping that we see that maybe in iOS 9.
Yeah, no, I'd love to see that as well. Yeah, anything else on the iOS 9 list while we're talking about it? I know there was a ton of
oh
stuff.
God! Well, we've been doing our wish lists forever. There's a lot of potential stuff there.
One of the big ones is a couple things that they've been working on for a while is the security stuff, and they've got an incredible security team in place now, and they're doing a lot of stuff to further lock down the system and prevent malware and other sorts of attacks from getting in there, and just generally to make us safer and more secure. And also, no surprise to anybody, they've pushed stuff that they've been working on for years has been pushed further out so they could really focus on stability. I haven't heard anything, like I've heard that for iOS 9 for sure. I haven't heard much about OS 10.11, but because I haven't heard that much about it, Peter, I wonder if that's going to be a major focus there as well.
It'd be smart. I can tell you from my experience working in the Apple retailer that I do that we see customers come in every day who are afflicted with malware problems. Adware has become a very serious problem on the Mac, and let me say this unequivocally so there's no misunderstanding. If you continue to hold to the old canard that Apple's or that Macs are virus-proof, you're lying to yourself and you're lying to anybody that you say it to. Viruses, as it were, may not be a thing, but malware and adware is definitely a pervasive problem on the Macintosh. It's a huge problem, especially for people who may visit websites indiscriminately and click on things indiscriminately. Now, obviously, there are a lot of things that you can do just in terms of best practices, and we've written about a ton of them. To secure your system from getting malware and to reduce the likelihood that malware will infect your computer. But the bottom line is you still need to be cautious, vigilant, and careful, and you do need to scan your computer every so often. You know, even in my own house, you know, I would expect my family members, of anybody, to be more inured to this sort of thing than anyone else. But I found malware on my wife's computer. I found malware on my kids' computers, and I haven't found malware on my own computer yet, but I figure it's only a matter of time. So Apple has, you know, done a fairly good job of securing the operating system in very fundamental, very foundational ways to make it more secure than it was before and more secure than what the competition could offer at the time. I'm talking about technologies like Gatekeeper, for example. But they need to do a lot more. They need to do a lot more. And until then, devices or apps like Adware Medic, for example, Bitdefender, Clam, XAV, and others are absolutely should be a vital part of every Mac user's toolkit. They should employ them on a regular basis to make sure that their machine is free of any kind of problems.
One of the things Mark talked about is something called rootless, which would be a way for people to run. Basically, a lot of people run as administrator now, and they have root access. And Peter can explain more deeply if he wants to. If he wants to get into terminal and sudo and stuff like that. But essentially, not everyone needs that sort of stuff. And rootless would let you run with the ability to do the things that most people need to do most of the time, but restrict access to any actual root level, machine level commands, which means that malware that comes in, it would be boxed off more. It would not be able to get into the subsystems and do the sort of and damage things to the extent that they were possible to damage under a full admin access system. So that is really cool, and it sort of continues this trend of sandboxing and other technologies. For as much as we've complained about them because they may not have enough entitlements for all the kinds of apps that we want, are still making things a safer place, and that's sort of the iOS model where if something bad does get in, it sort of can't infect it. So you have those two areas. You want Apple to prevent as much malware coming in as they can, and they do that through updating the definitions of the built-in malware tools. But if something does manage to get through, like a zero-day exploit or something else, you want to limit its ability to get into the system and to get into other apps. And extensibility was built with this in mind, and a lot of the systems were built with this kind of security in mind. And I'm so happy that Apple is making security and privacy a feature, because it really is smart competitively, because it's hard for companies like Google and Facebook to say the same things given how they make their money compared to how Apple makes their money. And also it suits my interests as a user. I just want much more of it.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree.
All right, so moving along then for the Mac, Peter, anything else you're looking forward to for 10.11? I mean, some people have used the old Snow Leopard thing, and I keep saying Snow Leopard was a massive change, but I think what they mean is that they want Apple to focus on stability.
Yeah, exactly. I want Apple to focus on stability as well. And the interesting thing is we just had a sea change with the latest 10.10.4 beta. I don't know if you want to talk about that now, Rene, or talk about that later. Okay. The 10.10.4 beta that dropped this week introduced a fundamental change to the way that networking, specifically DNS networking, is managed on the Macintosh. A software process that was introduced with Yosemite called Discovery D seemed to cause a lot more trouble than it was worth. We talked about this before, and so have developers on social networks. People like Craig Hockenberry and Marco Arment have talked about it as well. Discovery D is a technology that enables the Mac to wake from sleep over the network. So if you've got a sleeping Mac that you need to get files from, and you want to be able to do it remotely, you use that. Bonjour, Apple's zero configuration networking technology, uses it, and other really important foundational functions in the operating system make use of it as well. But Discovery D has also been the source of a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
If you've had a problem with your Mac waking from sleep and just seeing a cursor on a black screen, or never seeing a login screen at all until you restart, Discovery D might be the problem. If you've noticed that your fans spin up for no apparent reason, or that you open up Activity Monitor and you find that Discovery D has pegged one of your processor cores into the red, that's a problem. These are all problems that have been linked back to Discovery D. Well, 10.10.4, the latest beta, the beta that just came out this week, has replaced Discovery D altogether with MDNS Responder, which is the technology that's been around on the Macintosh since 2002, when 10.2 Jaguar was released. MDNS Responder doesn't do all the same things that Discovery D does, as I understand it. It may not necessarily be as efficient from an energy standpoint as Discovery D does, but it does work more solidly. And just since upgrading yesterday, and I admit I've got only at this point about 24 hours of experience, I'm noticing fewer problems on my own Mac and my own local network with my Mac updated to the latest 10.10.4 beta. So this is a very interesting change. Apple, famously is a black box, I think is your word for it, Rene. When it comes to this sort of thing, we've seen developers and users alike complain for months about the problems that they've been having with this technology, but Apple has said absolutely nothing on the record about it, and that's not at all unusual for Apple, but it still creates a lot of frustration for people who are having the problem, know what the problem is, can report on the problem, but can't really seem to affect change. Replacing Discovery D with MDNS Responder is a hack that has been talked about in developer forums for months, but it requires root access. It requires access to the command line terminal, which is a comfort level that many, many Mac users are not at. So it's not something that I've ever reported on. It's not something that is in sort of widespread distribution right now, but Apple seems to have taken that approach, replacing Discovery D with MDNS Responder altogether. We'll see if this is a permanent change or just something that Apple does until it works out the kinks in Discovery D. But my point is this: Yosemite, for all of its benefits, with handoff and continuity and the rest, and a new thoroughly Retina-optimized user interface and everything, introduced some serious flaws for many users. The snow leopard point that I think many of us, including myself, have made is that maybe Apple needs to lay off the features a little bit, and we've got a little bit of feature exhaustion, and just focus on getting the fundamentals right. So it'll be very interesting to see Craig Federighi on stage at WWDC in a week and a half to see what he has to say about that.
Yeah, I think, and the only issue I take with Snow Leopard is that it did do grow at Grand Central Dispatch and Exchange, and I think people get the wrong idea and think that it really is the marketing slogan of no new features. But I think what you're saying, and a lot of people are saying, is we want some of those tentpoles, or maybe even a large number of those tentpoles, to be what they did with iCloud, the mea culpa a couple of years ago, where they said this hasn't worked the way we wanted, and this is what we're doing, and we're going to regain your trust with this.
Honestly, in plain language, I'm fine with Apple introducing new features. I just don't want them to half-ass it.
Yeah. Ren, you also mentioned Apple Watch earlier, and maybe Apple Watch SDK for the native stuff.
Yeah, in fact, Jeff Williams just got on the stage at the Code Conference to announce that there will, in fact, be a developer preview of full native Apple Watch apps, which is pretty exciting. So developers, if you weren't already pumped for WWDC, there's your official starting gun. You're going to be able to play with native watch development, and Williams mentioned that would include access to the health sensors and the digital crown, which means, please, someone make me a roller skating app, please, please. But no, I think that's really cool. It's going to be previewed at DubDub and officially out with iOS 9, so developers will have all summer to play with native apps. It'll be interesting now that we know that the SDK is officially coming at DubDub, to see how they're going to position it in regards to battery, because definitely native apps, I'm guessing, are going to potentially take up more battery life than these handoff apps. And also, given that the Apple Watch has limited storage space, just how big these standalone apps are going to be.
You mean like Infinity Blade?
Oh God, Infinity Blade on the Watch. The only video game that I want on the Watch, if it's going to be that kind of thing, I want it like lightsaber style, So like I move, or if I'm like learning how to do judo or something, so I have to chop, and then the accelerometer sensors say, yes, you did this, 90% efficacy. Here's the swing that you actually like. Those kind of games, yes. Deep, invigorating 3D graphics, no, thank you. I did play. I played Lifeline last week for the Apple Watch. It's on both the Apple Watch and the iPhone, which is this text-based adventure, sort of choose-your-own-adventure game, where you talk to an astronaut, and that I thought was a really cool way. It's sort of time-dilated, and that was a really cool way of doing games on the watch. But no deeply graphic-intensive blah blah.
No Call of Duty.
No.
No John Carmack.
No.
Yeah. No, I think I'm really interested to see what sort of things could be done. I used to be afraid of battery life, but it's so good. Like I'm between 50 and 40 every night, and I use my watch a lot. So I think that Apple, I understand why they were so concerned with battery life, but I think maybe they really under-promised and over-delivered. So maybe there is more wiggle room. I remember with iOS 7, they were just afraid of letting anybody near the Gaussian blur because that was a battery drain. But then over time, they figured out ways of allowing more of that stuff in. And hopefully with the watch, they'll. I mean, there's bad actors on the iPhone still. I've got to kill Skype and Facebook occasionally because they just don't play nights. But those, I think, now are the exception and not the rule.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I have to kill your app on the Apple Watch because you move out of bounds, I'm happy to do that because the rest of them will give me functionality.
Yeah, and as I said, anything that gives Apple Watch apps the ability to access the health sensors, I think will be huge. There's a number of things that people can do with that data, and I'm going to be really excited to see those.
Okay, a quick break so I can tell you about Dashlane. Dashlane is a password manager. Why is that important? Well, you really want a strong, unique password for every site. You don't want to be using password 123 or your birthday or something like that everywhere, because it means that if your password is hacked anywhere, your password is hacked everywhere. It's effectively no security. So today's show is sponsored by Dashlane, and Dashlane is a password manager that has already helped over 2 million users. It's hard to have passwords that are unique for everything, especially if they're good ones, because if they're really good, you want to use pseudo-random numbers. You don't want words that a dictionary attack or someone who's got knowledge about you can figure out. So you want to have just this blob of letters, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols that looks like a bunch of gibberish, but there's really no way to remember those, especially not to remember multiple versions of those. So what you need is a password manager. That way you just as long as you can log into your password manager, just remember that password, you can log into any of your other passwords. And it's even when you're on the go, because logging in, Touch ID has made it way better, but still logging in on an iPad or an iPhone, it's way more trouble than logging in on a computer. So Dashword is an answer to that. With Dashword, you'll never forget another password. It's that simple. They're secured on your device. They're always up to date. They're always in one place. And because it's on your Mac, your iPhone, your iPad, your passwords are always with you wherever you go. It even helps you by filling in passwords. So if you go to a new website and you want a new password, you don't have to put in anything dumb. You can put in a good password right away. You can use complex passwords with numbers, symbols, all sorts of variables. You can get into your accounts automatically. It makes this possible. It doesn't even make it. It does make it great, but beyond that, it makes it possible. Best of all, Dashlane is free. Yes, free. iMore listeners can download Dashlane right now, right for free. Just go to dashlane.com/iMore. That's dashlane.com/iMore. DASHLAN.com/IMORE. Give it a try, especially if you're not using anything right now. You should be using something. You absolutely should be using something. Your friends, your families, everybody should be using something. Dashlane is free. No cost for you to try it. Give it a look. Thanks, Dashlane. One of the things I'm looking forward to, Peter, we went through all of last year with barely hearing a word from iTunes. I mean, we didn't get iTunes for continuity. We got an iTunes update, but not a major one. There was iTunes Radio, but then they bought Beats, and so that didn't roll out. And it seems like we were almost in a holding pattern last year. Do you think we're finally past that? Could we see this fabled new music service at WWDC? Could we see a better way of doing music on the Mac?
Well, I think part of that will depend on the content owners. If the music companies are on board with what Apple's doing, then great. If the licensing is being held up, then no, we won't see it until Apple's ready to show us that. Having said that, I can tell you that I have been agitating for years to see iTunes completely blown up. I'd like to see Apple completely go back to the drawing board and reinvent the music app, both on, I mean, and not really on iOS as much. I think it's all right on iOS, but the Mac app is just bloated and slow and buggy and prone to problems. I'd also love to see the 25,000 track limit for iTunes Match either eradicated or lifted to a significantly higher one, just because I'm bumping up dangerously close to it right now.
I absolutely agree with that. I think I just had a picture in my mind of little bits of iTunes just being blown up and falling, raining down all over Peter.
Caustic rain.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, part of that is I think that they need to really decouple a lot of these services from iTunes and have iTunes, the content, sort of negotiated separately from ongoing development of the apps. Like, don't worry so much about, worry about the content deals, but make that one person's job and let the other people just make the best apps possible. So if, like, the Apple TV is ready and the content deal isn't, ship the Apple TV. If the new version of iTunes is ready and the content deals aren't, ship that new version of iTunes and then let the content deals fall when they're ready. I think that takes pressure off everybody. You know, it makes things easier for the engineers, for the VPs, for everybody. I think probably for Eddie Q too.
It may be something where they feel like they actually have to launch it with those content deals, otherwise they don't feel they can make a big enough deal of it, or launching with those content deals are how they are twisting other people's arms, being like, we're going to put this on stage in June, and if you're not part of it, you're going to miss out. You know, I don't know. It's a lot of contract nonsense, which unfortunately is not the most interesting thing to me. But I will second Peter in that I am very much looking forward to potentially a new version of iTunes. The 8.4 music betas I've been enjoying so far, although right now there are some things broken and it makes me sad. But
And
that's what a beta's
handoff
for.
for iTunes, Ren.
Yeah, handoff. Oh my gosh. There was an app called Seamless that was made by a developer who later went to work for Apple that did this, and it was glorious. And oh man, that would be so great. Also, just putting it out there, Sonos, make an Apple Watch app and make it handoff
And
compatible.
AirPlay. Please add
Yeah.
AirPlay.
Oh, please
Yeah.
add AirPlay. Oh gosh.
Yeah, it's so terrible.
It'll never happen, guys.
We're dreamers,
Never
Peter,
happened.
and we're not the only ones.
Yeah.
I hope someday you can join us, and WWDC can be one.
Don't you remember, like, one of the first ads that Apple ever rolled out for, I think it was the iPod, showed a guy playing Take California on his Mac from the propeller heads, I think it
He's
was.
dancing, and then he takes it, and then he
And then he
continues
takes it,
listening to it.
and he's listening to it on his iPod, and it's like, what happened to that? We had this future a decade ago. Come on. There you go. There you go. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I actually have my original iPod here because I
Oh,
was using
wow,
it
it's a
for-
click wheel iPod. Amazing.
Yeah, no, this is the original 5 gig.
Yeah,
Toast
nice.
jelly.
Yep.
Yeah, Stephen Hackett did a post for us today on the original iTunes Digital Hub, the original Mac Digital Hub strategy and how it's evolved with iCloud. And that is, it's so important to so many people because it's not just all the stuff that I've bought on iTunes, but it's all the pictures and videos and everything of our families. And having it on a Mac, I think, was okay for the time, but having it on iCloud and having it other places, things like iCloud Photo Library, I think, are very much the future. And I'm eager to see where it goes because iTunes on the cloud is okay, but it's not perfect yet. Like, I can't go to a web browser and just access my stuff and play it anywhere. And it seems like there's a lot of opportunity, but at the same time, Apple can only do so many things at once. And we just talked about that.
Yeah, but I mean, you know,
Yeah.
we've heard this spiel from Tim Cook over and over again about how music is in Apple's DNA. You know, time to put your money where your
Time
mouth
to
is.
DNA up, Peter's saying.
Right, exactly. I want to see more of that DNA. Come on, you know. I mean, if music is really that important to Apple, if it is, you know, one of Apple's North Stars, to borrow a tune that, or to borrow a term that I hear entirely too much from Tim. You know, I want to see a best-in-class music application, and right now iTunes on the Mac anyway is not it. It's frustrating with all the stuff that it doesn't do or does poorly, or causes confusion. You know, it's just it's a myriad mess. It tries to do too much. It needs to do less, and that which it needs to do much better.
So you heard him. Strap on your Helixes and get us some better music stuff. So that kind of folds into the Apple TV, where we're waiting for the new hardware there, which could include, you know, a new A-series processor, things like Metal, a game store, maybe a full-on app store,
Yes.
CK there. we talked about this before. I'm still not sure I need apps on my Apple TV, but I do want games. I mean, like I know if there's Twitter, if there's an App Store, Twitterfic will be there day one. I just know that kind of stuff will happen.
What I want is less crud on my Apple TV. You know, there have been
organization.
Well, organization absolutely would be key, and I mean, obviously, it's trivial to go into the settings and shut off the myriad channels that you don't use, and I know I've done that for just about every sports channel. I'm sorry, sports fans, but I just don't use my Apple TV to watch sports content.
Because no Bruins.
Because no Bruins, exactly. Yeah, now that the Bruins are out of the NHL Stanley Cup.
The Bruins
race,
are out of the NHL? Oh, sorry, just
yeah, there we go. And you know, now that Tom Brady is benched for the first 4 games of the NFL season, sports are dead to me, man. Dead to me. No, seriously. You know, there's just a lot of content, and that's not the only stuff that I'm not interested in. There are lifestyle channels that have popped up on Apple TV that I'm not interested in, but Apple really doesn't give us a very effective way of organizing that content now, and they really need to. I'm hoping that between iOS 9 and whatever Apple has up its sleeve for a new Apple TV, that's in the cards. What I'm hoping is that those sort of new features aren't going to be limited just to a new Apple TV box, because I imagine a lot of people over the course of the past few months have plunked $70 on a brand new Apple TV and want to see it work for a while. I know that my second generation Apple TV is still going strong, and it's gone from the living room to the bedroom. You know, it's been relegated to a secondary position. But you know, because I was one of the many people who went out and bought the Apple TV when the price dropped. So I want to get as much out of that as possible, and I suspect that there's a lot of life left.
Because we've been complaining before about how iOS devices are artificially constrained because Apple forces you to make your app work on all the different. I think now you can say only Metal devices, for example. But would you want a game store that takes full advantage of the latest hardware, or would you want developers to have to make something that also supports maybe not the 720p Apple TV, but the 1080p with its like single core A5 and 8 gigabytes of RAM of storage?
I think it's perfectly reasonable to limit functionality based on what the hardware is capable of doing. What I really have a hard time with is when I see marketing-led engineering decisions. You know, decisions that are being made based on hardware margins as opposed to what the hardware can actually do.
We did hear, I think Mark wrote about this as well at some point, that Apple is changing the way that they're doing some of the development. Like instead of making a full-flight iOS 9 and then removing things to make it work on older iOS devices, they're making a core set of functionality that will work on all those devices and then expanding features upwards, which they hope will make. And you wrote recently, Peter, about your iPad 3, which will hopefully make better performance on older devices. So I could see. I don't know, Ren. I could see a situation where some of the new stuff, like interfaces, available on the older Apple TV, but there'll be features that require the new hardware.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like app developers can target certain devices for the iPhone, I feel like they'll be able to say, oh, well, this app will run on the third generation Apple TV and the new Apple TV, and this just requires the new Apple TV if you want to take advantage of these features. I think that's going to be okay. There are some apps where you're not going to necessarily need super high horsepower or an A8 processor or anything crazy like that. But there are also potentially high-res games that will need that information.
We had a few questions here. Some of these are people asking about... Martin wants to know if you can submit an Apple Watch Pro tip. Yes, you can, Martin. There's a couple questions here about things for things like specific troubleshooting. If you're having a problem with your device, we can't really fix that on a podcast. But if you drop a question into our forums or send it in, we can help you with that kind of stuff. Question about HBO. So HBO was sort of Apple is rumored to be working on this big content deal where they'll be able to provide streaming television services, and a wide variety of programming. And they launched in March with HBO. Now, which basically gives you a la carte access to HBO's programming. I forget what the price is, like $15 a month or something. And John Mariani wants to know if he says that HBO is apparently contemplating a change in pricing to go down to as low as $9 a month. And I guess he's asking about the value of this kind of content. I know Ali is busy right now writing an editorial about this, but have you guys tried HBO Now? And are those kind of services on your Apple TV something that interests you?
Ooh, I have HBO Go as part of my cable subscription, but yes, I'm going to be, when I move and I end my cable subscription, I'm going to be switching over to HBO Now. There are certain shows that I just want to catch that I'm not going to be able to catch with, I don't subscribe really to traditional cable. I just have, I literally have basic cable and an HBO subscription. Because it was the company let me set it up that way so that I didn't cancel television service altogether. But there are certain shows that I want to see, and that's what drives me on television these days is particular shows, not particular networks. So if a network happens to have a couple of shows that I'm willing to, that I want to subscribe to, I will subscribe to that network. If it only has one show that I'm willing to see, and if it's not a must-see, otherwise Twitter will spoil it kind of show, I will just wait until the season's available on iTunes.
I'm very similar. I like that iTunes has almost everything when it comes to television and movies, and I realize that there are notable holdouts, but I can pretty much just have an iTunes account and get what I want across music, television, and movies. Comic books, I kind of have to have 3 or 4 different accounts right now, and I don't like that. I would much rather there just be one thing that and I know that's not in the best interest of the content companies, but for me as a consumer, if I imagine, Peter, if I had to subscribe to the Warner Brothers service to get to get Harry Potter movies and the Universal to get their movies, and I had to manage accounts for every one of those services, it would be maddening for me as a user. But it feels like for newer content, that's sort of what they want us to do.
That is, and I think it's going to create a lot of exhaustion, a lot of confusion for consumers. What I'm waiting for is Spotify for movies, music, and movies and TV shows.
For the new ones, right? It's like the Netflix model, but for current TV.
Right, exactly. And Netflix obviously gets us part of the way there, and they're really boosting up their original programming with really great content. I mean, Daredevil is something that I'm just watching now. I know everybody else saw it a month ago, but in my copious free time, I prefer to do things like sleep and eat and breathe. Right, exactly. So I'm just catching up on it now, but it's given me another reason to pay that $8 every month for Netflix. And not that there's a shortage of content besides, but you've got a limited entertainment budget every month, and already I'm tithing to Comcast. Unlike Ren, I have one of their fully loaded package deals. I think I get every movie channel except for, ironically, the movie channel. So whether it's Showtime, Anytime, or Anywhere, whatever it is, or HBO Go, I can pretty much watch whatever content I want using their apps if I want to on the Apple TV or the iPad or even the Mac now. But to be perfectly frank with you, most of the time I'm watching it on demand from my Comcast DVR itself. So that the barriers to how you get your content, I don't think interest me as much technically as they do logistically. It's Comcast insisting on being the gatekeeper, or not just Comcast, but Time Warner Cable or Cox or Charter or whomever might be my cable or dish subscription company of choice, being the gatekeeper between me and the content that I want. That is the problem, and that's the problem that a lot of people who are new to the Apple TV have. They buy the Apple TV, or they come in shopping for the Apple TV with the expectation that if I get this, I'm going to be able to chop $100 off my cable bill. Well, no, you're not, because first of all, you're not going to have access to any local programming, and we've heard rumors that that's something that Apple's working on for the next generation Apple TV, or the next generation Apple TV software. But more than that, you still have to go through an authorization and verification process for any premium content that you want, except for HBO Now and forthcoming services from other premium content providers. But how old is that going to get when you find that you're spending every month just as much as you were before to get less content than you did before? I think that is a pain point, as we say, that is going to create a lot of frustration for consumers and is going to keep them from adopting this in a more widespread fashion.
I agree. We got about halfway. It's the end of the hour. We only got about halfway through our WWDC preview. We do have another show before the show, so hopefully we will get back to that next week. In the meantime, I want to find Ali Kazmula couldn't join us this week, but if you want to, you can find her on Twitter at imuggle, IMUGGLE. Peter, whereabouts are you?
I am at Flarg, FLARGH.
And how about you, Serenity?
I'm at Settern, Settern, on Twitter and Instagram, and also floating around on iMore and iMore TV on Instagram.
And you can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of us at iMore. I want to once again thank Dashlane for sponsoring the show. Dashlane is free. Yes, free. You can download it if you go to dashlane.com/iMore right now. It's a password manager. It's something everybody needs to have, and it's something that at the price of free you absolutely need to check out. So just go to dashlane.com/iMore and never forget another password. That's dashlane.com/IMORE. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll be back next week.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
I forgot to do the ads again, so I got to do them really quickly.
Okay.
Red Hat and Dashlane. Peter, do you have anything pithy to say about Red Hat?
No, nothing nice.
I'm gonna dash away unless
All
you
right,
want
so
me
you guys
to.
go. No, you guys go, and I'll take care of this.
All
Okay.
right, sounds good. Bye.
Godspeed,
Bye,
Renee.
guys.
Bye.
Thank you.